All right, I have an incredible interview for you. It's actually part two of an interview with Jovan Hutton Pulitzer. He pulls back the curtain and walks you through exactly how the 2020 election was stolen. He shows you all of the evidence and data he has. He has spent over $3 million to keep this and the chain of custody. He's going to walk you through that, but he also needs your help. Please go. This blew my mind. It absolutely blew my mind. So if you believe that the election was stolen and you want to know with detail exactly how it was done, enjoy this video. One of the main reasons that President Trump won was he promised to handle the illegal immigrants and close down the border. He's done a great job on that. Another thing that my audience is very concerned about is election integrity. I know President Trump has done a lot, but he's not going to be in office forever. You understand election integrity. You are coming to my audience. You've got something that you need to present to them. Go ahead and tell us about what you're doing to make our elections safe and fair.
I spent $3 million doing it because the more we found and the more we needed to adopt technology to be able to find these things and do it, it was just, oh my God, which I'm going to cover some things with you, appalling things with you. And I'm going, holy smokes. Well, I kind of knew we were in trouble when the Senate in Arizona wouldn't talk about key things, which are actually crimes. They kept on talking about the machines. You saw all of the lawsuits. There were over 60 of them that were brought in the name of Trump or et cetera, Trump et al. And there were 60 plus lawsuits and all of them get kicked out or stopped. The reason they got kicked out or stopped is because it was about the machines. Now, under the Election Assistance Commission and the Help America Vote Act, all of the rules are voluntary. They have no enforcement power. Now, where the crimes are, is the crime is if you can prove something happened to the paper. That's the ballot. Now, that's a state and a federal crime. Now, President Trump knows this firsthand. We've talked about it personally. He wants to get rid of mail-in ballots. But you got to remember, we have 50 elections. We're not federalized. And God, pray to God, we don't federalize because then it's going to be even worse. So he can't really get rid of them. He can only demand different rules for the federal component of it, because right now we have state elections, federal component. Well, in this, as I tried to turn everything over to the Arizona Attorney General, here's all this data. They basically said, well, how much data is it? We talk about it's actually about 4 petabytes. We're talking, 100 times the size of the of the Library of Congress. But anyway, because it's just millions and millions and millions of files, because you're creating proof files and stuff. They literally didn't want to take possession of it because it was too large. So we could have chosen just to stop there and shut down the audit. What would have happened is it would have triggered a clock basically on a statute of how long you can hold it, but it would have tripped another legal statute called latches, meaning you knew, but you didn't do anything about it. And since you didn't do anything about it, you've now lost your right to prosecute on it. I came in this thing to fix what is wrong with elections, to make sure we have free and fair elections. Regardless of who wins, we should have free, period, elections. They're not fair. They should be just authentic and transparent. So I made the hard decision over 4 years ago that we're going to have to keep this audit open, and we're going to have to keep the storage of this data in perfect chain of custody. So it's never been modified, never been moved, never been shut down. Because see, if you shut it down and it does go to court, they say, well, where has it been in between? You could have changed it. You can't let that happen. You have to keep it perfect. And so that cost about $10,000 a month just to be clicking along. Well, we've done this now for what? 1,800 days. It's ridiculous, right? So we have burned through a tremendous amount of cash personally to just make sure we hold this for the American people. And so what we did is we went to the American people now for the first time ever. We didn't raise money to do our part of the audit or anything. We've never had marathons or any of that. We basically said, we're going to hit a shortfall. We're going to hit about a $396,000 shortfall at least in maintaining all of this information through the midterms. Now, here's why this is important. You can go back and look at the elections of Obama. He came in at 68 million votes the first time, 65 million votes the second time. He was supposed to be the Messiah rock star. Then you had Hillary against President Trump, and she came in at 65 million. Then you get Biden at 81 million, this big middle finger flipping us off. And then you get over here to Kamala with this last election. She was at 68. Except closing on election night, she was 68 million and change votes. In May of this year, right, we're talking well over a half a year later, they had raised her to over 74 million and change votes. The election's been over for 7 months. We went back and just looked at it recently. They've added another 240 some odd thousand votes to her for 2024. The election's been over almost a year. What the system is doing is they're taking all these phony votes and they're making these phonies vote again in midterms or smaller votes, and they age them and make it look like they're still voting. And that's how they're going to say, no, that's an active voter. Well, now Kamala's up to 75 million votes. That would lead you to believe she eclipsed Obama twice and Hillary. That's where the con lies. So what we know is going to happen is when we get to the midterms, they're going to take possibly the House and the Senate. It's so narrow. That is going to lame duck President Trump, and then they're going to bring impeachment all over again. But new things are going to come into play, like the emoluments clause, and they might be successful. It might be very detrimental. We can only get this averted by showing exactly how it's done. So we have all of this massive evidence. Now, you've learned some very hard things in these 4 years. You heard a lot of things about, I infiltrated an Antifa phone call and I heard the president of the voting company or whatever say that don't worry about Donald Trump. He's not going to win. We made sure of it. That was just basically BS. It was a lie, never proven, not real. Then we got promised, don't worry, we have all the election data from 3,300 counties, all the PCAPs, the lawmakers going to come in, the cyber symposium, see it, recreate it, do it, and all this other stuff. Then when that got to court a few months ago, you hear Mike Lindell say, well, we never had them. America's been let down because it doesn't have proof that can be proven in court. You have to have ironclad proof. So I'd like to run through some proofs with you because here's just one of the samples of the evidence we're sitting on, why the system tries to avoid it, but this is prosecutable proof because it has to do with the ballot paper. So let me just take you through a few things and I'll kind of show you how this works. So we're going to start at election night 2020. And when it was determined that Joe Biden won Arizona, after all was said and done, it basically said that Joe Biden won Arizona by roughly 10,516 votes. Okay, so that's the magic number, 10,516 votes. So I'm going to recreate some things for you as a forensic auditor that we look at and we find, and it's incumbent of us to take what they reported, and all we're doing is checking what they reported. That's it. Was it real? Was it factual? So the very first thing that we realized in looking at the telemetry, that means all the data coming to the machines, we realized that, wait a minute, why did Maricopa County, now remember that's the fourth largest county in America, second largest voting block of people in America, and it's larger than most states in volume. So this is a monumental audit. We saw everything. One of the things we saw, if the election ended on November 4th or 5th, whatever it was, right? It's been so long. Anyway, and it's supposed to be certified by the county in a few weeks later, and then it's going to go basically, like January 6th, it's got to go up and be codified with electors and stuff. Why did they run in about 100, and I'm doing approximate numbers, why did they scan in 120,000 ballots of votes a month after the election? Now, the first thing you think is, wait a minute here. We're looking at it. These are their reports, not ours. This is the exact data off the machines, the exact telemetry of everything come in. And the first thing you see, which Arizona wouldn't allow people to talk about, how do you ever run in 120,000 ballots 1 month after the election? How convenient is that? And then when we look at those numbers, the numbers still weren't accurate in what they were reporting. So then we kind of go backwards. So we look at certification day. We look at certification day of when Ducey certifies it for the electorate, or when we, Katie Hobbs certifies it in the county level. Well, at the county level, when they certified it and they said, this is the number of the election and these are right, they still hadn't counted over 240,000 ballots. So how do you certify an election that you still haven't even processed, supposedly 200 plus thousand ballots? And so you're going, wait a minute, where'd you get this number? So we back up again and we look at the county numbers. Every single day from the end, just go backwards. Now we're starting at the end and I'm going backwards, right? On any given day when they gave the numbers, that is not the numbers they had. They literally just picked the end winning number out of the air. So now as we go back to time, right, now we're at election day. If you remember on election day, when they say, well, we're not going to have results and it's probably going to take a while, they said they needed 10 extra days to count the ballot. Now, remember, what you have so far is you got 120,000 ballots over here running a month later. Now we're going to look from election day to those 10 extra days of counting. Well, what you need to know is prior to election day, they were processing about 140,000 ballots a day. So that's the benchmark. For 28 days, it's about 140,000 ballots. And they're using 10 machines running these things. Okay, so now we know how many they process. We know how many machines it takes. However, on those 10 extra days that they needed to count all the extra ballots, here's what happened. Their information is they had one day, we'll call it about 90,000 ballots. They had 2 days, they didn't count anything. All the other days, if we averaged them out, would be hard pressed to break 7,000 ballots. So what were they doing in those 10 days? If you can process 140,000 a day, and this is barely 7,000 a day, and you didn't count for 2, what's going on? By the way, it's worse. They were using 10 machines before. They only used 2 after election day. So if they were overwhelmed and needed 10 extra days, why would they only use 2 of the big machines to do it? Yeah. So you understand something's wrong, something's a con, because they were not processing ballots. Now let's go a little back before that. So we're fighting to get all of this information about, and you might remember it, President Trump on TV says, when do you get the routers, get the Splunk logs, right? And they're talking about the routers and Splunk logs. Well, that is how you can see who went in and out of the system, who was looking at what. There was about 30,000 anonymous entries into the system. This is where they'll go in, they'll peek and see what's going on. They'll come back out. For some reason, for the very first time in history, the quote unquote routers for the system, instead of Maricopa hosting them, it was hosted at the sheriff's office. It's like, why would you move your router over there? Well, they knew the chances of getting audited. With that move to the sheriff's office, they actually got protected. We don't have to turn it over because you'll see sheriff and investigative information, and we got to protect that. So we never got them. So you got to look harder at this stuff. Well, if you remember, there were a ton of lawsuits going around, and we had to keep on suing to force the Senate and then the county recorders to give us the information. And we finally, after a lot of wrangling, got the audit. I won't even go into all the nastiness, but we finally got it. Now, when we got a hold of those boxes, there were 1,675 boxes of ballots. 1,675. Now, this is all physical evidence. Keep remembering, you need a physical evidence trail. This is key. Maybe you're writing this down, you'll get it. There were 1,675 boxes. Those boxes, by law, have batches of ballots, which are about 200. That's called a ballot. It has a batch header card on it that shows how many people voted. Here's this, here's that. You have a batch header card, a batch, and then in a box, there's usually 8 batches. When they're put in a box, they're sealed. 1,675 boxes. When we finally did get the boxes, there were only 52 out of 1,675 that were sealed and protected. Only 52 out of 1,675. So that's 1,653, or 53 left over. Now, let me tell you about those boxes. In those boxes, when you cracked them open, they were all in disarray, just total freaking disarray. you could see the batches. They were kind of stuck on the bottom. All of the header cards, right, of what the votes are supposed to be, those were all on top. They weren't with the batches. Batches were on the bottom. They were there, but in a batch of 200 ballots, there might be only 30 ballots in there. What was in between the two was layers and layers of just stuffed ballots. They're just stuffing them in, all out of order. You don't even know where they go. So what that should tell you is, hey, these are in total disarray. Somebody's been rummaging through these things. The real telltale sign is if you look at the 52. Now, if you remember any of my work, I told you about, these are not printed to the right size. They're not printed to the right paper. You've failed in the category. They're not mail-in, they're not real mail-in ballots. There's too many duplicates. There's too many handfuls, just all this junk. I won't go into that. But if you go to those 52 boxes and you look inside those 52 boxes, all of the errors that we found in the 1,653, like let's just take Sharpies. Remember the Sharpie thing? They told you it wasn't a problem. It was no big deal, Sharpie Gate. Well, that's because of my investigation. First time in history, they forced people to use Sharpies on election day. It's been a no-no heretofore. Well, just those election day ballots, just election day, because that's when you use the Sharpie, those, call it 130,000 ballots, those 130,000 ballots had 2.1 million extra votes on them because they bleed through. So it looks like all of these dots. The machine can't understand it, and so it all looks like votes. Just on those 100,000. Now remember that only happened on election day, 2.1 million votes. When we looked at the extra votes, when we looked at these 52 boxes, all of them were printed perfectly. There were none out of color sequence. There were none out of fold sequence. There were none on the wrong paper. There was not any bleeds or anything. You know why 52 boxes were sealed like that? Because right after they got done with the election, Fontes, who is now, I guess, AG, and Katie Hobbs, who's now the governor, they handpicked those boxes to say, if we get audited, that's what we'll look at. So in going through that audit where they found nothing, which they released their audit, they pre-chose those 52 boxes. Now, I ask you a question. If you got 52 boxes that are pristine that you can use to predict the outcome of the election and 1,653 that don't match, don't you think something's wrong?
Yeah.
Come on.
Let me ask you something. How much time do you spend every day on a web browser? How much time do you spend clicking, searching around, scrolling, typing, endless tabs? It's a lot, right? Well, there's a new AI web browser from Perplexity called Comet. And that is completely changing the way that you interact with your web browser. Using Comet feels like having a personal assistant living in your web browser that can actually do things for you across the internet. That's right. It can do things, not just get you answers. You can ask Comet to handle tasks for you, and it literally clicks, types, searches, and scrolls like you would to get things done for you in the background while you go about your day. Comet can shop for you, make reservations, book travel, summarize articles or videos, send emails, schedule meetings, and a lot more to make your life easier. Let me give you an example. I'm about to go on a business trip to Tampa. So I've asked it to find me the best Mexican restaurants in the area. I want them to have a reservation, good reviews, and they have to have Diet Coke. Well, it found the one that I'm planning to go to. It set up the reservation, and it's dumped it over to my calendar. You can use Perplexity and Comet to book fun things with your kids or grandkids, or buy things and send it to them. It's really quite amazing. Pretty cool, right? Download Perplexity's new AI web browser, Comet, by heading to pplx.ai/Gardner and let your browser work for you. Plus, right now, when you download Comet, you get a month of Rumble Premium for free. That's pplx.ai/Gardner. Go check it out right now. I'll leave a link down below.
So now let's go back further. So we're going through all these ballots, and we need to compare. You get a physical ballot. When it goes into the machine, it creates the first image of the ballot. That's called the pre-image. So you get a physical ballot. It gets fed into the scanner. It basically makes a duplicate copy and says, I was just fed into the scanner. Then in between it, adjudication happens where they make changes if something was wrong. That's another image. And then you get a post image, okay, that says, here's how we corrected it. And then it goes into the EMS file. So in that thing called a cast vote record, you can see it from its physical state coming in and whatever. Well, we had another problem. When they turned over all of the drives, all of a sudden we found we have, we'll just call it 130,000 ballots, 130,000 ballot images we couldn't see. They gave us a drive, and we had to, literally an hour before the subpoena was going to be in effect and they were going to go to jail for not turning over information, they turned this over. So that was all the rigmarole. Well, you didn't ask for what we archived. It was all a joke. So they gave us this drive. So when they first give us the drive, they say, those images are here. We try to open them. They're all corrupted. We cannot see them. It's called a JSON file. It's a really big file. And they said, well, they're there. We gave them to you. So I reach out to the team that developed that JSON format. And I said, can you help me figure out what's going on? They looked at it, best experts in the world. And by the way, for my paperwork, I worked with the paper company themselves, the paper executives, to get the specs. JSON folks said, we don't know what happened. These look intentionally corrupted. So we go back, hammer on them, and finally they give us a new drive. Well, let me tell you about that new drive. You've got thousands of these machines deployed. So when they fire up for the elections and you start seeing things going in, they're all handled in all these transactions. So you have a standard topography of how they go in, just like if you save a Word document or whatever, that's called a standard. So we can look out across every single drive and everything as far as the formatting's right. But on this one drive, for whatever reason, it was in a whole different format. It wasn't even in a format for the election. It wasn't even in for a format that it outputs. So it's like jumbled. And so we finally get to look at these images. They give it to us again, and we notice something. This is why you have to look at everything. I'm looking at 2 million ballots. So we've got, and I'm just going to use round numbers. We got 1.8 million ballots that show everything that happened. And here's the standard. It's repeated 1.8 million times, right? And then we got this odd drive that they're not in batches. They're not even in the right format, but here they are. And they said this was what was missing. Now it's all completely different. But if you were to look at them and you put them side by side with the right format, in this format, somehow it got zoomed up and they cut off the header. Now, if you think of fax machine in the old fax days, date, timestamp, phone number, all this, it has all the information of where the vote came from. That's the format. So what they did is they manually cut off the header. So we couldn't tell what day went into the machine or where. Now put that in your notes. So we now got this drive, okay? No pre-images. We finally get it months and months later. So we go, okay, well, let's just see if they were doing it right. Now I'm going to accelerate here. The next thing you look at, okay, why is this not in the right format? Why could we not see the images or anything? You start looking at a chain of custody documents. Every person that handled ballots, they all sign a piece of paper. Again, you compare it leading up to the election for 28 days to election day. So what we did is we took in all these thousands of sheets of paper where every time they pick up something from a Dropbox, right, or a voting center or anything, it says, here's where it came from. Here's how many ballots we picked up. This was how many were spoiled or ugly or ripped. Here's the security number. Here's the replacement security number. My name is John Smith. I handed it to Mary Smith. Peter and Tom are the transporters. They're going to transport it down to the MTech Center. It gets to the MTech Center. Security guard signs it in and says, my name's Mike Security. I got this. There were 700 ballots. So it matches. And then another person confirms. That's called a chain of custody, right? Where'd it come from? How many did you get? So we plotted all of these. So for 28 days, basically several hundred people doing their job on chain of custody signed these documents, right? You had 2 instances where somebody forgot to sign. It was one person forgot to sign something, but basically had 99% compliance. Okay. Now I'm going to put it all together for you. We found a very interesting thing. You remember at the beginning, I told you those 120,000 just run in a month later. Well, for some reason, every single one of those were election day ballots. Commonality election day. Then we go backwards in time. You know that drive we had to fight for where the images were missing? Damned if every one of those weren't the election day ballots. Then you know where we had Sharpie Gate? Damned if that happened only on the election day ballots. Now, I told you about chain of custody. I told you hundreds of people signed every day, each place. Guess what happened on election day?
No signatures.
And no numbers of how many ballots were returned. Conveniently, they can't really tell you how many ballots they transported, but here's the smoking gun. If several hundred people working as employees all forgot at the same exact time on the same exact day, that means somebody issued an order. So we are the only people that knows every person that ever touched it in every part of the way. And when you look at it all, because they never had the number, here's the deal. They didn't count legally or properly not a single one of the election day ballots. The reason there is no pre-image and they changed it after the fact is because that's what they ran in later. They had to manipulate the data to make it look in real time. And that's how they made up the numbers. We have every name, every date, every location, every executive that was involved, every supervisor, everything. And that is what creates some interesting evidence, because all of that evidence I just gave you is all that one day. And so instead of being this hypothetical of a 6-degree polynomial fractal pterodactyl or whatever, here it is in black and white. Who gave the order? Who stopped? Why didn't they run them in? Why did they make them up a month later? Why did they change every single one of them? Here's the names and signatures. Let me know. And that's why the parties avoided it, because each ballot is a state crime and a federal crime. There's over 120,000 of them. So we're talking about 240,000 individual felonies with names associated to it. And this is why the system has worked so hard to break us, because the moment I stop, I'm at a real conundrum. What would you do? Would you keep on paying thousands and thousands and thousands of every month to keep these things in a perfect chain of custody to fight for your country when the system tries to wear you down? Well, that's the law for. They try to wear it down. We've got to keep this active through the midterms. We're gonna come up very easily about $396,000 short. On top of that, in order to develop new technologies, which I can, if we get over the 396,000 and we can do more, we're going to introduce some new programs where we know how to check for new things, because it will allow us to bring some more interesting prosecution stuff to bear. But it's the only physical evidence that exists that is left of all the 2020 election. It's the largest archive in history in this way. And so it will be needed for cases. It will probably be needed for the Supreme Court. The wheels of justice move very slow, but this has to be kept on the outside till it's used in court. And at worst case, if all is said and done and President Trump manages to survive past the midterms, then what we'll ultimately do is just make sure it's integrated into the Trump presidential archives so future historians can go back and recreate 100% of our work in a general election, which has never been done for history. But I'm just telling you, we're falling short. We're not going to be able to make it. And once we stop, this evidence dead. And I think with America finding out that the PCAPS was crap and never real and never had it, and found out that Antifa call BS was junk, or they keep on pushing you onto the machines where it's all voluntary, this is the only provable, prosecutable court evidence that exists, and all the methodologies of what happened in 2020. And we need your help.
Okay. Wow. Oh my gosh.
And that's just election day. I could keep on going.
Yeah.
We can tell you in our system, if you remembered all the people, all the colors, everybody caught so much flack. That was me. So I can watch from cameras afar. And if somebody was in green, was in a blue area, I knew they were out of the area. Get your ass back to your other area, right? Our system is so sophisticated that if I was sitting in a court of law and I pulled out a ballot, here's how it works, pull a ballot, here's what it is, here's what happens, here's right, wrong. opposing attorney, because I'm the expert witness, says, well, that was an accident, I could say, okay, well, let's look at it. And I could literally go 100,000 times in a row and say, was this an accident? Was this an accident? Whatever. We can tell you exactly what batch and what box and on what pallet that ballot existed on. And we can reproduce it faithfully to the standards of forensics. Thanks, forensics files. This was the single largest physical forensic investigation in history. It's monumental. It's the single largest investigation in election history. Very first time that actual forensics has been brought to bear. And we have a uniparty, and they're terrified of it because everything we deal with is prosecutable. And if you don't believe me, look today. I think it was one of the states just convicted or indicted 7 people for fake voter registrations and how they were doing it. If you look at everything that's been brought to court that works, it only has to do with the paper of the ballot, not the machines. They're terrified of us. And when you see all those different steps, I want to remind you, when you see they ran them in a month later, when you see they forced you to use Sharpies, when you see the pre-image didn't exist, when you see the number wasn't there, when you see they complied and then on one day they didn't comply, everybody, you know what you got? It's called widespread. And it's basically called an agreed to federal racketeering. We are the only people that can prove it with the evidence that proved that was decided, done, and orchestrated. And that's what we have to fix our elections. And it's why they tried to assassinate me 3 years ago.
Oh my gosh. Okay. If people want to get involved, they can go to Give, Send, Go. Right. You have already put in hundreds of thousands of dollars of your own money to
3 million of our own money.
3 million of your own money in order to maintain this. And you're going to fall short by 396,000.
Right.
You've already raised, it looks like, around 47,000.
Right.
I'm going to put a direct link, Jovan, down below. I'm going to commit to giving money to this personally.
Thank you very
I hope
much.
People in my audience, if you are a patriot that believes that the election was stolen and you want the evidence that can actually go to court, we need your help to do this. Now, that's amazing. Everything you just laid out makes so much sense. I can't wait for this evidence to be used against them. And I know President Trump wants to bring this. I was speaking with the CIA guy yesterday. He said, listen, there's so many fires that the president has had to deal with. I promise you, this is on his list of things to do. Right. So I know that this is something he wants to solve for the American people.
We have to, or we're not going to have a country. Look, you can go back and you can watch me from the very beginning. This is not about whether President Trump won or Biden won. It's agnostic. It's about, this is how you said you ran the election. Here's exactly what you said in numbers to make that outcome, and none of it was real, and here's how we can prove it. Folks, this is about all elections of any kind. And if you're a Democrat or a liberal maybe listening to this affects you too. You don't want somebody deciding your future illegitimately at all. You want it decided the way the republic was designed, to be this great republic and to make it happen. So this is important. This is important for everybody. This is important for history. Think what the world would be like if we could go back and we could look at ballots cast for Abraham Lincoln. Those are historical documents. Well, these have now been preserved for the first time in history. The most controversial election of ever. Scholars will study this going forward. This will exist 1,000 years after we're gone, and they can continue to study it, look at it, and know. But we got one shot at fixing this. I'm glad I could serve my country. It pains me greatly to have to admit, I just can't keep this up. I just can't keep supporting it up, and I have to ask for help. It's the first time we've done it to keep this going. We're just pushed to our limits.
Yeah, no, you're a patriot. I appreciate what you've done. Again, I'm going to put a direct link down below for those that can make a donation. Let's get this. I'm going to personally donate to this. Jovan, if people want to follow you online, we're about out of time here. How can they do that?
Just use my full name, Jovan Hutton Pulitzer. So you can find me on Rumble every day, 7 a.m., 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, Jovan Hutton Pulitzer / that's / at rumble.com / Jovan Hutton Pulitzer. Twitter canceled my account. I had to get a new one, but you can follow me there, Jovan H. Pulitzer on Twitter. But just look for the keywords Jovan, Hutton, Pulitzer all together. You'll find me on all social media. I do what I do, twice a day, every day, 365 days a year. And I'm here till we win, because this is about, it's not for us, folks. We're adults. It's over for us. This is our kids, our grandkids, our great grandkids. We're here, the first generation, to see our government, country, and everything going down. And we got to fight for it and make sure it survives. And you never think you would see it in your generation, but that's what it is. And we're all fighting for everybody's kids, everybody's grandkids. And you can find me, and this is what we fight with every day. I just bring truth and facts and teach. Don't go off on the theory stuff. Here's the facts. Here's what you need to know. Decide for yourself.
Okay. Thank you very much for taking time out today. I know how busy you are. Thank you for all you've done. I'll put those direct links down below. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
God bless you, sir, for having me and doing this. Thank you.